Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking part in today's Economic Development and Revitalization Task Force session. I want to thank our governors who are on the task force and here today for what we think will be a great discussion, or at least a discussion. I'm Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. It's my honor to co-chair this important task force with South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster. And our task force has a large portfolio of issues that are front and center right now, from infrastructure to state stabilization, energy, environment, land management, taxes, a whole lot of topics. And over the past 2 years, I've been pretty proud about how governors have worked together in a bipartisan manner to tackle things from a pandemic to the rebuilding of our economy. And today's discussion is not only going to focus on that, but how much more we can do through the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act. But let me just say, for each of the governors that are up here, I know we're both proud, but we are also blessed in how each of our economies haven't just come back, how they are booming. We look at what's going on in Kentucky right now. We're coming off our best 2 years of economic development ever. And on this front, now building not one, but 3 battery plants to power the next generation of automobiles. One through Ford and SK on a $6 billion investment where we're building the largest battery plant on planet Earth. And then we're building another one right next to it. And then with Envision down in Bowling Green. It's companies that through help and partnership with the federal government, including the Department of Energy, are not just moving us forward, but looking out for our national security. Send Elements is building a $1 billion facility in Hopkinsville, 26 miles from my dad's hometown that nearly got wiped out by a tornado. But they're bringing it hope, and they're going to recycle the lithium in our phones and in our tablets so that we can use them in automobiles and not have to rely on China. That's what we are able to do when the private sector and the public sector come together. And of course, what it means is jobs, good jobs, new jobs. And to somebody like me, the dad of a 12 and a 13-year-old, it means the best opportunity in my lifetime, that no matter how big they dream, they can chase those dreams close to home. And given that they have been in my life every day for the last 12 to 13 years, but I can hear the clock ticking because right now they go in the room and shut the door. These are things that bring us new prosperity, but also new opportunity. And for a state like Kentucky, let me tell you, we're really enthusiastic and we're really hopeful about what we're seeing right now and what it can mean to our people. And that's going on, I think, in each and every one of the states up here. Incredible successes because of great leadership. And maybe now we're not looking back at a pandemic, but we're looking forward at an opportunity to change things fundamentally for the better for our people, whether that's our Eisenhower moment that we're having in infrastructure, or whether it's this technology that we are seeing where, oh my goodness, just think about the jobs that our kids and their kids and their kids' kids can work, and it's all happening right now. So I'll turn it over to my colleague, Governor McMaster, to give some comments and introduce our federal partners.
Thank you, Andy Beshear, and I add my welcome, and you're exactly right. We're at a real, I guess, a crossroads, you'd say, and everything we do depends on energy, it seems like, so we need plenty of it. And I think we got a big crowd there. There must be some money involved in what we're getting ready to talk about. But
they expected bourbon.
Did you bring any? I know you've given it away earlier today. Okay. Let's see. I'll be very brief, just to give you our context in South Carolina, the way we come at this. Speaking of energy, we are 55% nuclear. We are the 3rd largest producer of nuclear power in the country. I didn't know this till I was preparing these remarks. Illinois is 96,000 gigawatts. Anybody know what a gigawatt is? You do?
You do now.
Look at that. The new guy knows what a gigawatt is. That's a billion watts. Gigawatts is a billion. Yeah. Illinois has 96, I'm gonna round it off, 96,000 gigawatts. Pennsylvania, 75,000 gigawatts, South Carolina, 53, Alabama, 46, North Carolina, 43, Texas, 46, Tennessee, 35, Michigan, 34, Georgia, 33, Arizona, 31, and I stopped counting there. And that's a lot of us believe very strongly in the power of nuclear power. And I'm glad that the administration is seeing that that is not necessarily renewable, but it is clean. And I'm one among a number that think that we have got to have a lot of that. But we are proud to have these people that we have today. We have solar farms in our state. We just had a battery battery company move in from out west that recycles batteries. They take lithium ions or something, the things, again, I've never heard of, and they take them out of every kind of battery. The batteries in your phone, the batteries in flashlights, the batteries in automobiles, and they recycle them. And so we don't have to get that from some other country. And that's, the name of it is Redwood. So we're trying to be, and I think we can all have the opportunity to be on the cutting edge, because there's plenty of room for these plants to go. But we have 4 people here who know what they're talking about, probably a few more as well, but we have four speakers. And I want to introduce Alejandra Castillo. And I do have a very important Groucho Marx type question. Alejandra, we saw yesterday, Alejandro Maraca. So is that like Henry and Henrietta? Is
Correct.
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a Spanish version of.
Was anybody wondering that besides me? Nope. Well, we educate, and also, and she is the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development. And we heard from the secretary yesterday, Gina Raimondo, who made an excellent presentation. And also we have Maria Robinson, who is the Director of Grid Development Office at Department of Energy. So Ms. Castillo, we will turn it over to you for 5 minutes. And the man over there's got a sign in case you.
Oh, I'm fully aware. Thank you. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Governor Beshear, and thank you, Governor McMaster. I will say that if you don't have an Alejandra in your family, you will soon. So and I say that I say that a bit jokingly, but I also say that from the perspective of the changing demographics in our country. And I have the pleasure to talk to you about commerce and everything that's happening at commerce. So I have 5 minutes. I'm going to speak a bit fast, but here's the deal. Commerce has 13 different agencies, and all agencies touch you in some way, shape, or form. Right now, commerce is going through one of the most exciting moments that I've ever lived. And I was sharing with Governor Pritzker that I served under the Obama administration under Secretary Pritzker. And for me, at this moment in time, it's really what was mentioned before. It's not about just looking back and making sure that our country was coming out of this pandemic, but really looking forward and reimagining not just our current economy, but also the future economy, and making sure along the way that we have the right ingredients in our economy, and that meaning not just climate resiliency, but also workforce development, preparing the ecosystem to sustain all of these dollars that are coming down. I want to start out by speaking about both the 4 pieces of legislations that have been mentioned before: the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS and Science Act. Under the American Rescue Plan, Commerce received $3 billion at least for EDA, and I'll talk about that last. But I want to start out with NTIA, National Telecommunication and Information Agency. As you all know, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law provided $42.5 billion for broadband equity access and deployment, or the BEAD program. If anything, we could have taken away from the pandemic was that not everyone had access to the internet, not everyone had affordable access to the internet, not everyone had the speed. So we saw not just our children failed in terms of the education that we received, our elderly could not have the telemedicine that they needed, and our businesses could not transfer into e-commerce. So this BEAD program, I am urging all of you around this table. There's a big deadline that's coming up in June 30th. And that's the deadline for when Commerce will be deciding the dollars that are going to be reaching your states. One thing that I also urge you to pay attention to are the new FCC maps that we're all awaiting for. And those FCC maps matter because the formula are hinge on those maps. So a couple of things that if you're not taking notes, I hope you are. Let me also move on to NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And Governor Beshear, you and your communities have suffered so many of the tornadoes. Governor Pierluisi, you've suffered so many of those hurricanes. And many of us across the country are weathering some sort of, no pun intended, are going through some sort of either natural disaster or climate change. So NOAA is actually also under the Inflation Reduction Act has received some dollars as well to improve data, which is so vital. And I urge you as well to look at what NOAA is doing. As I go through the time, let me then focus on both CHIPS as well as EDA. This CHIPS and Science Act provided the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, about $58 billion to bring back the semiconductor industry to the US. This is not just an economic priority, this is also a national security imperative. So I encourage you also to look at what NIST is doing, the deployment of those dollars. You will see more information about that when the notice of funding opportunities will be released. So just be mindful. I have my colleague here, Bernadette Carrillo, if you can raise your hand. Bernadette is your liaison at the Department of Commerce to all of the governor's offices and mayor's offices. So I'm sure Bernadette will be happy to connect with you all. Finally, let me talk about EDA. EDA received $3 billion under the American Rescue Plan, and I am happy to say that all 50 states and territories received ARPA money through EDA, not just for travel and tourism, but also through our two marquee grants, which were the Build Back Better Regional Challenge and the Good Jobs Challenge. We were able to deploy capital all across the country to support and fund projects that are of critical importance as we move forward. Under the CHIPS and Science Act, EDA has just received $500 million as a small down payment on what's called tech hubs. It also received $200 million for a program that's called Recompete. Tech Hub has been in the works for decades, and it's just exciting that we're finally building out tech hubs. More to come on that. I expect that within a week or so, you should be, there will be a request for information, and I invite you to please provide us your perspective, your ideas, your thoughts of what tech hubs should be. And then finally, the Recompete, which is $200 million, is on the other side of the spectrum, which is really focusing on distressed communities, highly distressed communities. And again, you should, I hope you will be monitoring what EDA is pushing out, which is the RFI, request for information on Recompete. Our job is to provide these dollars to communities as quickly as possible. So know that we are working very diligently, and we want to make sure that these dollars are reaching communities. But at the end of the day, we are also focused on regional economic development. And I invite the governors around the table to work together, because again, economic development has no borders. The work that you do in Kentucky could also impact what's happening in West Virginia. So I'll end with that, and thank you very much.
Thank you. I wish we had more time. We will have some questions from the governors later. If there are any governors sitting out there, you gotta, oh, well, they're filling up. Good. Okay, Maria Robinson, Director of Grid Deployment Office at Department of Energy. Floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Governor McMaster and Governor Beshear, for hosting this very, very important conversation. I send regards from Secretary Granholm, who is friends with many of you. Looking over in the general Midwest region over there. So I'm Maria Robinson, and I'm currently the director of the Grid Deployment Office over at the Department of Energy. In the name of full disclosure, prior to DOE, I was a state legislator, which I recognize is not very popular under this crowd, in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. But, I also share your perspective on the relationship between the federal government working really closely at the state and local level. You don't really know until you work in a legislature that has home rule for 351 communities how important those relationships are. So across the Department of Energy as a whole, and particularly in my office at the Grid Deployment Office, we're really excited about all of the different opportunities under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, which we helpfully name our uncles Bill and Ira. That's how we refer to it colloquially inside, to support energy innovation, and as well as ensuring all of this federal money that we're going to talk about in a second are enhancing some of the private investment into our communities for that economic development. But we also know that we can't do this work alone, and we're really excited to be able to maximize some of the regional benefits as well as some of the community benefits. Of course, trying to support the administration's Justice 40 initiative as well, which is aiming at ensuring 40% of benefits are federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities. And I'd say particularly from the energy and electricity side of things, the regional collaboration is so important. Our energy system with all those gigawatts they don't follow traditional political lines. The way that the grid is set up does not follow the way that states are set up. And so having to work together across state borders and across regional borders is just so important to ensure that we're investing and maximizing that investment here. So through these different pieces of legislation, specifically for us, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act, the Department of Energy has received about $100 billion in direct funding and hundreds of billions of dollars in loan authority. Of that $100 billion in direct funding, about a quarter of that runs through my office. Amongst the different types of investments that we'll be supporting here includes, as previously mentioned, the domestic manufacturing of battery plants, developing new hydrogen hubs, which I know is a very popular topic, expanding some electric vehicle charging infrastructure, securing a strong supply chain for energy technologies, catalyzing the nationwide development of new and upgraded high-capacity electric transmission lines, and supporting investments to modernize the overall flexibility and resilience of the distribution system, that's your local area, in order to create a more resilient electric grid. And that's honestly just a very small snapshot of the number of things happening currently at the Department of Energy. Rarely is it that I think telling people to go to a website is helpful, but in this case, we are updating daily or several times a day with all of the new deadlines that are associated with each of these different programs. So I really encourage you to keep an eye on that and making sure that we are looking at all of the new funding that is coming forward almost on a weekly basis. I know that it's also a lot of work from the state level, and that is something we at the Department of Energy continue to try and improve upon to ensure that we are reducing that administrative burden for states and of course for our municipalities and local friends. We've really gotten into this concept paper idea where you put in something a little bit more lightweight up front, and then you get that encourage, discourage, and then move on to a more robust application that you would typically expect from the federal government. So our goal is to make sure that we're getting a lot of these good ideas. I'm really excited to hear at the state level, some of the applications are even making it into your state energy offices or your state infrastructure coordinators are looking at some of these ideas just to get a better sense of what even the private entities are actually submitting and thinking about moving forward, which I think could help with overall economic development planning. So all this funding, of course, hinges on us getting the implementation right, and we're really laser focused on getting this opportunity out to all of you. So we're really excited to be working with all of you here at NGA and look forward to the other comments.
Thank you very much. I sure wish we had more time. We might have to do this again.
Sorry.
Governor?
Thank you. And thank you to our federal partners for being here today. We stand ready to work with you. And if there's anything that we're excited about doing, it's deploying those investments. Beyond government, so much of the innovation is being led by the private sector. Much of the success of these federal investments will depend on that private sector for innovation and to move our country forward. So today we're fortunate to be joined by two leaders in this space that both happen to be friends. That's what happens when you're one of the co-chairs. First, we have Aamir Spiller, who is state president for Ohio and Kentucky with Duke Energy. And then we'll hear from Aamir, who is the president of North American operations for Schneider Electric. Both have operations in multiple states. While that hurts my feelings, it does show the sophistication of both of these entities. So Aamir, would you lead us off talking about some of the investments that Duke has been making and how you approach these federal opportunities?
Right. Thank you, Governor Beshear. Delighted to be here this afternoon with you and Governor McMaster for what is a very timely and important conversation. As Governor Beshear noted, I have the privilege of leading Duke Energy's utility operations in Kentucky and in Ohio. But as one of the nation's largest utility providers, our reach is a little bit bigger than that. In fact, we serve 9.8 million electric and natural gas customers across seven states. We are a company with a very clear vision that is predicated upon an ambitious goal to be net zero carbon emissions by 2050. This is a goal that is framed and informed with our customers in mind, because businesses in Kentucky and in South Carolina and in other locations have their own climate goals, and they are depending upon us at Duke Energy to help them be successful in achieving those goals. And we have seen that access to cleaner, affordable, reliable power is indeed a very effective economic development tool. And that's why we were really excited to see Congress's passage of both the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the BIL, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act. These bills allow us to continue on this clean energy journey while mitigating the cost to our customers. So I want to focus a little bit on what we're doing under both of those federal bills. With respect to the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment Act, really two paths are being pursued by us at Duke Energy. The first is where we are an eligible entity. We're seeking those funding opportunities to mitigate the cost of the investments for our customers. And where we are not that eligible entity, we've embraced that partnership. So we are supporting our local and state partners as they pursue funding initiatives that will really support and grow our communities. And I think that partnership is aptly demonstrated in the Southeast Hydrogen Hub. So Duke Energy Kentucky, along with our sister utilities in the Carolinas, were foundational to the formation of a 6-state coalition where we hope to develop infrastructure, a network of projects across these 6 states that will form the basis for hydrogen infrastructure. And just think of the jobs and the economic development that will bring along. Complementing all of these investments is the Inflation Reduction Act. And we have been looking very closely at that bill, primarily because of the tax credits that are enabled by it. These are tax credits that will help us on this journey, the clean energy transition, while again, mitigating the costs for our customers. The tax credits are really important to us as regulated utilities. And why? The tax credits that we receive are returned to our customers. So what are we looking at? We're looking at the solar production tax credit. We're also looking at the storage investment tax credit. And when we think of storage, it's not just battery storage, but pumped hydro storage, such as our Bad Creek facility in South Carolina. The nuclear production tax credit is very important. It will allow us at Duke Energy to continue to operate 11 reactors in the Carolinas. Those reactors are clean forms of power, as Governor McMaster noted. They provide good paying jobs, and the longer they operate, they will continue to generate tax credits for our customers. There is so much exciting opportunity, and we've heard about the sheer power of collaboration and partnership. So we at Duke Energy stand ready to partner with Governor Beshear, Governor McMaster, and the governors in our other states to advance a clean energy economy and a bright future for all.
Thank you. Aamir, in a similar vein, how is Schneider Electric an incredible company? We're really proud of y'all looking at these federal opportunities in terms of your corporate strategy.
Well, thank you for having us. And, in both of your states, governors, we have about 2,000 people, 3 factories and 230 suppliers we interface with. And really, Schneider Electric in the US is an American company. Square D started out as a Detroit Fuses about 110 years ago, and is now part of the fabric of 4 out of 10 homes in America are powered by our content, some of it built in Kentucky. ASCO, American Power Conversion, or APC, the PI system that powers a lot of the utility infrastructure, is all developed by American entrepreneurs and now deployed in the United States. And as we look at this, since 2020, we have tripled the amount of capital we're deploying in US-based manufacturing. Now, that was a response to the supply chain crisis as we realized that we were moving from a just-in-time world to a just-in-case world. As we look forward, the consequences of this investment and the policy that all of you are enabling, we believe we can triple that investment rate. So it'll be cumulatively 5 times greater than the pre-pandemic environment. Now, we do need some clarity on Built in America rules and how they'll be sustained. And we do need bridge capital to make sure we can move those supply chains, because as we learned in the pandemic, when you move global supply chains suddenly, they don't react particularly well. So we have to do this in a planful way, but we're very encouraged by the policy environment. Additionally, we have secured to enable this in a public-private partnership setting, $1 billion of capital. Not far from here in Montgomery County, we financed a 6.5 megawatt bus depot that powers 70 buses, fully electrical. What's compelling about that project is there was zero upfront capital from the state or the municipality. And all that money now goes to citizen services. In addition, that microgrid is available to turn around and power the homes in a disaster event. And there is certainty of supply working in conjunction with the utilities. Amy and I were talking, again, support to get the interconnects approved faster would go a very long way. In JFK, we're about to electrify that airport with an 11.3 megawatt project in a similar structure. And all that capital is available, and we're excited about doing things in many of the states represented here. Finally, we are looking at digital transformation in a very big way. Our guidance to our customers, and therefore everyone in this room, is we have to digitize, decarbonize, and engage. And you heard in the prior panel from Jennifer and Brad about the impact of digital. I could not emphasize that more. You talk about shovel ready, it's not 1923, it's 2023. Let's talk digital twins first. Let's get all the details worked out in software where we can rework faster without wasting money and then get it right. And I'll give you 2 examples, both in Kentucky. In Lexington, we have our manufacturing facility that is 64 years old. We invested, and it is now one of only 10 global World Economic Forum lighthouse facilities because of the amount of automation, digitization, and technology put in place. That facility now consumes a lot less energy, a lot less water, and is a lighthouse in terms of what you can do in rejuvenating existing manufacturing. That facility also makes those panel boards that go into 1 out of every 10 homes, 4 out of 10 every homes in America. And as the governor said, a little bit of Kentucky everywhere we send them. In Louisville, we have an energy hub, and we globally process $42 billion of power. We buy this energy, we build algorithms, we procure it and manage it for our clients. When Walmart did its gigaton project, all the analysis of how they can buy that power came through that hub, and we're excited to host you there in a few weeks. In that hub, we clear 50% of the power purchase agreements that are assisted done in this country. And we would love to do more because I think that allows for everyone to have access to clean energy. And then the last thing I think is really important is to make sure that we continue job training. You heard about in the prior panel, we will need millions of energy professionals, from PV to electricians to EV maintenance to field technicians to the people working in our water infrastructure and port infrastructure as those communities digitize more. This is an incredible opportunity to create both technology, but also human capital. And as a company that's been part of the electrification of the United States since when it started, we could not be more proud and privileged to be your partner.
Thank you very much, sir. We'll go to the questions from the governors in a moment after we have a minute or so from each speaker to give us some ideas on what kind of questions the governors might want to ask you. Ma'am.
Easy ones.
Ms. Castillo?
So I wanted to piggyback on your last comment on workforce development. And again, as Commerce, we have been funding the Good Jobs Challenge, 32 of our Good Jobs awardees across the country. But that is where I think both the relationship with governors is going to be very important, as well as we also curated many great projects that we weren't able to fund, but maybe in your own states, you can support those. So I would love to also hear if there's any areas where you think both what we've done in terms of curating these projects and the funding that you may have at the state level.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Robinson?
Ditto on the job training side of things, because that's a real issue for us in the supply chain, but mostly want to hear what we can be doing better to make this funding more accessible. It does us no good to hold on to the funding. We want to get it out the door as quickly as possible. What can we do to make this easier?
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Spiller?
Thank you, Governor. I would ask Governor Beshear to share a little bit about how you really leverage the Energy and Environment Cabinet to really try to seize the opportunities created under these federal bills.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Paul?
Look, from our perspective, in addition to the human capital, working with the supply base is absolutely critical. Schneider Electric in the US does about $11 billion. And even for us, 50% of our supply base are local, family-owned enterprises. They need access to capital, they need support, they need policy clarity. And the faster we can build that supply base, the faster we can reshore manufacturing. We are not actually capital constrained, we're constrained by the supply base. So labor is one issue, but supply-based development down to basic things like electric steel, copper, all of these things are absolutely critical. So the more investment you can create in the upstream supply, the faster we can move.
Thank you, Ms. Paul. Now questions for the governors, and we've got about exactly 20 minutes before we must quit. Kevin Stead, Oklahoma.
Thank you. Thanks so much, panelists, for being here. And thanks, audience, for joining us. My question, as we all are focused on a reliable, affordable energy grid and how do we make that resilient and grow more of everything over the next 50 years, Oklahoma does it really well, I think. We lean into, obviously, we've got great oil and gas, but we're number 2 in wind energy. We've got, we're pushing heavily into hydrogen with an MOU I've set up with Arkansas and Louisiana. But I guess for Maria Robinson, my question is, over the next 50 years, as we think about this, what's your perspective on small nuclear power plants? We're starting to hear more and more about that. We don't have any of that in Oklahoma, but just kind of interested where you see that going.
Sure. And thanks so much, Governor. I went to University of Tulsa for master's. So, yeah, right.
Hurricanes. There we go.
Yeah, exactly.
Tulsa Hurricanes. Yeah.
Should be the tornadoes.
I'm going to stay out of that conversation. Sorry, I brought it up. So I think there's a couple of different things. One is a lot of the grid modernization needs to happen regardless of what kind of sources we're moving forward with. And that is huge. And that's why we're putting a lot of funding into that. Looking forward, we actually have a March 31st deadline for some of our states, including some of the ones sitting at this table that haven't yet to put in their applications for formula funding. So hopefully everybody will be doing that. I'm sorry to all the staffers who are now stressed out about that. But I do think that we have to continue to look at these technologies. We're really excited the NRC has moved forward with the first licensing agreement for a small modular nuclear reactor. I think we got to see where that goes the first time around. One of the things that my office does is keeps large nuclear on board. We have the Civil Nuclear Credit Program, which is on the order of $6 billion for that. But I definitely see some of these more emerging technologies and that R&D legacy part of DOE moving into the deployment space now. So excited for the future.
Can I follow up on
Yes,
that
sir.
just while we're on the
I'm
topic?
going.
Thank you. So I think we are the small modular nuclear reactor you're talking about, Wyoming. And that's exciting. So two questions on that. One is we do not have domestic uranium. We do not have domestic HALEU that comes from Russia. When we were talking to the Trump administration about if you're going to put tariffs on something, put it on uranium from Russia. And we heard from the Southeastern power side that they didn't want to see more expensive fuel. So now we have this unenviable position of maybe Russia might cut off the source of uranium. Now they never cut off anything before, so I'm sure it won't happen to the U.S. I'm being very facetious. What are we gonna do to make sure that we build out what is now a decrepit old infrastructure system to build domestic capacity for not only uranium, but for critical minerals and rare earths, et cetera, et cetera. And then the second thing is when we talk about transmission infrastructure, we're really talking about large infrastructure projects and centralized generation, whether it be a wind farm or something else. And are you also looking at microgrids from the point of view of both security and just equity? So.
Excellent questions. We have a lot to talk about, Governor. Let me start with the HALEU and the domestic side of things. So you might have seen there were some really exciting bills passed and some conversations about the omnibus last year for domestic HALEU that ultimately didn't make it into the omnibus. My understanding is there are some larger conversations potentially happening in Congress right now as we're facing the potential threat from Russia. And I think that is a big area where we would be delighted to figure out how we can do some of that enrichment work. It's just getting those right funding mechanisms in place. But I think there's a lot of opportunity there for new economic development related work happening. But that's sitting with Congress right now. I don't pretend to know what Congress will do in the future, but I think that's a potential area for great bipartisanship. We'll say that much.
But are you pushing it?
At this moment in time, the department has been looking and pushing for that since last year as part of that omnibus effort to move forward with it. I'm not the Assistant Secretary for Nuclear, but I know that she supports that very much. Got it. Yes.
Continue.
Sorry. Also on the rare earth minerals, that's a big effort. So there's a new office that's focused on manufacturing and energy supply chain. And part of that is the rare earth minerals of figuring out how to continue to work through the American supply chain for that, recognizing that we rely very heavily on other countries moving forward. So that was one question. Your next question was on transmission, which is my jam and a third of my portfolio. So, and the other third of my portfolio is microgrids. So we are trying really hard to make sure that we're balancing. There's this need for new transmission in large part just because the grid is old. There's a lot of this work happening around what's called reconductoring, which takes our existing transmission lines and makes them more efficient. A lot of that work needs to happen on our existing space, but now we're also having things like Great Oklahoma Wind, which we didn't necessarily have years ago when we first built the transmission system and figuring out how to export that to other places that are needed. So that's huge. And then on the microgrid side, we're giving out grants. We're giving out grants from microgrids on the order of up to $10.5 billion. We have applications from all 50 states, which was really exciting when it comes to both giving funding directly to utilities or to states as well. That includes microgrids, battery storage, transmission projects, and a lot of distribution hardening, which I know is so important to avoid outages during storms.
Excellent. Governor Moore.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Governor. And thank you. You actually just answered one of my questions about the aging of the infrastructure for microgridding. So thank you very much. Also, I just want to say thank you for all the partnership that you all have shown to the governors, and particularly, the new governors who have come on board. I know I speak on behalf of, I don't see any new governors. I speak on behalf of the only new governor here, actually. But you all have been incredibly thoughtful and just aggressive in reaching out and making sure we're up to speed. And so we just want to say how much we appreciate and thank you. And very excited about this conversation because it really is a public-private philanthropic conversation about how we need to build all these assets out. The question I have, and it dovetails a little bit on the Justice 40 question. It's on we're being intentional about making sure that we're funding, particularly in historically disadvantaged communities, disadvantaged neighborhoods. The question I have is about wealth, because we still in this country have a 10-to-1 racial wealth gap. And so how can we move in partnership to be able to address the fact that I think, all of us I know agree that at the end of this process, if we allocate all of this capital and we have new forms of energy growth, new forms of renewable and sustainable and clean energy, we have more grants going to disadvantaged communities, but we watch the wealth gap increase. How do we avoid that reality? Because I think all of us would agree that if that becomes an end state, that's going to be unsatisfactory result.
So, Governor, I'm going to take that question. A couple of things. First of all, welcome as a new governor. A couple of things. First, at EDA, we looked at our investment priorities and we made equity one of those first initiatives of how we deploy the dollars. We're looking at equity very broadly. We're looking at equity in terms of disadvantaged communities, underserved communities, rural areas across the country, Native American communities as well. So making sure about that. The other thing is we've also changed the way that we write these grants. These grants have to be coalitions of partnerships. And we are looking at the authenticity of those coalitions to make sure that when we put a grant out, it's including community colleges, universities, unions, nonprofit philanthropy. Philanthropy definitely has a big role to play here, and we're engaging them as well. As it relates to the wealth gap, one of the agencies within the Department of Commerce is the Minority Business Development Agency, and they are right now deploying $100 million on the capital side of things. They also work on not just the capital, access to contract, access to markets, but also making sure that as you all and the federal government purchases goods and services, that we're able to make sure that minority-owned firms are actually not just being created, but actually scaling and growing. That's one of many possible tools to answer your question. I recognize the challenge, and we are very intentional on how we're deploying these dollars.
Thank you. Governor Carney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you for leading this discussion, all those who are present, and for our panelists. I have I think a pretty simple question, which is, as we as states develop our EV recharging stations, is anybody looking at connecting those with renewable generation sources, right? So that we maximize the carbon reduction in that whole thing, or are they looking at power purchase agreements that would tag into wind farms or nuclear or whatever? And what's the status of that? I guess whoever can handle that, be interested in hearing about it.
So if we can, I think our private sector partners here have some thoughts on that as well, and then we'll kick it over to the federal government.
Governor, thank you for the question. And we are looking at the deployment of electric vehicles across our jurisdictions. And through a lot of different lenses, because first and foremost, we need to ensure that the grid is going to be able to continue to reliably support that new load while meeting all of our other service obligations. So we will absolutely be as creative as we can be as we think about really this developing market around alternate fuels. So it will be electric vehicles. It could also be compressed natural gas. There can be in the future as well hydrogen, and we're looking to develop that a little bit further through the hydrogen hub. But yes, we will look at those opportunities. So it could be an instance where you do utilize microgrids or battery storage as that service complement to make sure that that charging load can be effectively deployed while again ensuring the reliability of the overall grid.
Yeah, and all I would add to that is it's really application specific. So if you have a university campus or a hospital campus, you can actually take all of that energy load for the EV transition and couple it to a microgrid. And that allows you to make sure that entire space is not putting pressure on the grid environment. Now, interconnects are critical to making that happen, but in the distributed environment, people will start using energy differently. Even your car will become an energy source and energy will start becoming bidirectional. So that's where the utility providers have to take a role. But large infrastructure can actually be taken off the grid environment through microgrid solutions coupled with EV, which is what we're seeing in our project pipeline across the country.
So how about like wind project, offshore wind, onshore wind, connecting to an EV, recharging system?
Absolutely. Where the energy is generated and where it's consumed, provided we have the right transmission, is it
Power
can be
purchase
disconnected.
agreement kind of thing?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Let me do like you did, Wes, thanking both the Department of Commerce and the Department of Energy. Because as you may know, some of you may know, Puerto Rico is in the midst of an unprecedented reconstruction of its infrastructure. This is the result of a huge hurricane that impacted the island about 5 years ago. We have a lot of federal funding allocated for that purpose. But in the case of DOE, just the last week, Secretary Granholm and her team were in Puerto Rico. President Biden tasked her to ensuring that we transform our energy sector the right way. The labs are assisting us. The PR 100 study is in the making, so serving as a guideline for us to meet our goal of making Puerto Rico fully reliant on renewable energy sources by 2050. That's not easy. It's easy to say, difficult to do. So we need all the help we can get to do this smartly. And so I appreciate what Secretary Granholm has been doing, and I know will continue doing. Then Department of Commerce comes in because Puerto Rico, as most states, we've had 2 solid years of growth the last 2 years. But that was not the case in the past. Actually, we came out of bankruptcy just recently. So this is like a new day. But Deputy Secretary of Commerce, Don Graves, and his team was in Puerto Rico this week because the Biden administration is intent on making sure that our growth becomes sustainable. That is, long-term growth. So again, I thank the Department of Commerce as well. In terms of the grid, let me say something. One thing we need to make sure we do is that we make it not only reliant and whatever efficient, it's also smart, because it is hard. We're in the midst of bringing in solar. As we speak, we're adding 2,000 solar systems with batteries on a monthly basis to our system. This is a distributed energy initiative. On a parallel basis, we're incentivizing, and we do have in the pipeline, industry scale solar projects, but they all need to be interconnected to the grid. And again, easier said than done. So that's the next level, is to make our grid not only better, which we have to, but also smarter.
Is there a response? Would anybody like to?
Sure. And thank you, Governor, for your partnership as well. I know that you've spent a lot of time with Secretary Granholm and our team, and that Puerto Rico team actually lives within my office as well. I'm sorry, I haven't made it down yet, but they've been doing such a phenomenal job on recovery. One thing that I want to point out that the governor mentioned here is we also do have a lot of technical assistance funding. I know TA funding seems very small dollar compared to the billions that we talk about all the time, but I also know that within state government, getting a little bit of funding to do that study that you want to do to help bring on some more people or consultants for some of the work that you're trying to do in terms of planning is really important. So we also really look forward to that sort of partnership with the states to figure out how we can best use some of that technical assistance work. But we're well aware the grid needs a lot of investment as well, and we're working as fast as we possibly can.
Thank you, Maria. I hope as you decide on the distribution of these funds, I hope you keep in mind that only one state shares the name with the nation's capital. I just hope you keep this in mind in your distribution.
Do I need to recuse myself because I was once your intern, Governor?
Yeah,
Yes, I assume that that's part of
it's
it.
great to see your progress. So a question, I want to put a bug in your ear about the supply chain for these high tech. So we have two silicon anode battery companies coming into Washington State with the federal government's help, which we're just so excited about. We think this is the future, but all of the silane capacity production just got swept up by South Korea company the other day, which makes we got no supply chain for silane now. And I guess the question is, do we have enough bandwidth to get to those supplying systems, including silane? And I just wanted to put that bug in here. I think this is a new challenge we didn't anticipate. We thought we had the access to this silane. We don't now. I hope we can talk about that.
Absolutely, and would love to talk offline. I think both of us would as well. And I'll put a bug in everyone else's ear, which is that there's only one place in America right now that currently manufactures grain-oriented electrical steel, which is necessary for grid components. So we'd love if there was more manufacturers in America of that work. So sharing ideas back and forth there.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
More questions?
Our state, Maine, as well as the New England states together have submitted some concept drafts to the Department of Energy, asking for funding for transmission and distribution upgrade projects, which is really vital to our green and clean energy projects. We've got a lot of wind going on, a lot of and offshore wind we're going with, and a lot of solar just in the last 4 or 5 years. So do those kinds of projects align with the DOE's initiatives and goals?
I did just sit down with Dan Burgess just
crying out loud.
yesterday. So to talk a little bit about all the different, I was on a panel with him too.
Oh, okay.
So yes, that is exact. All of those are within my office as well. So looking at those larger projects, actually, many of the states around here have submitted some large scale projects that we're really excited about that are on the innovative side. So in addition to some of the work that really needs to happen, for example, at your munis and co-ops that are long held repairs necessary, we're also looking at that wider range of some of the larger innovative work, such as the offshore wind, but very well aware.
I have time for one more question. Governor Carney.
So all this discussion about the aging of the grids has made me a little bit nervous. Can somebody talk about that and how vulnerable we are there?
No, I would speak on behalf of Duke Energy, and we have over the years been making very data-driven investments in our grid, and we are continuing to deploy those investments. So we talk about a smarter grid. And as I think about our grid in Ohio and Kentucky, it is smart. We do have devices on there that can sectionalize those outages, that can redirect power. And so we are avoiding those interruptions for our customers. We are doing that across our fleet. I think about as well our transmission lines, and we're making investments, not just so that it's reliable, but that infrastructure is resilient. As we think about our infrastructure that can better withstand natural disasters, weather events, and even animals that can cause incredible disruption to our facilities. So we are continuing to make those investments. We have that obligation, and we wear that obligation very heavily to ensure reliable, safe power for our customers.
And I assume there are reporting requirements. Who do you all report to on those vulnerabilities?
Our regulated utilities do require on an annual, if not more frequent basis, updates on the performance of our systems. To the commissions, our state commissions.
Public Service Commission.
The only
Yes,
thing I
sir.
just want to add to everything Amy said, because physical infrastructure is critical, but creating digital models and making sure the cybersecurity of the grid is being invested in is equally critical. And the threat vector around cyber is gone exponential in the last few years, and we don't expect it to slow down. So again, you heard from Microsoft, it is a massive area of training, investment, software deployment, and I would encourage all the governors to be looking at that very closely.
Thank you. We're out of time, Governor.
Well, I want to thank all our governors that showed up for the panel and so many different questions and comments. And I just briefly wanted to give voice to something that I've certainly been feeling that I hope you all have too. And there is a great feeling at this conference this year. We have had real discussions. We have done it civilly. Everybody trying to do their best for their people of their state. And I want to thank all of our other governors for being able to come together this way and show the country how it can be done.
Thank you. We are adjourned.